I wanted to talk a little bit about these beginning steps on the dress. So in one, they tell you to use seam tape. Um, I'm imagining they're talking about stay tape, which I was a little confused because the instructions is that they want basically you want a permanent piece in there so um, it will stay, because if you're stay stitching that gets cut off or out of your seam allowance. So um, this is more of a permanent type of tape, and I'm gonna call it stay tape because that's what I know it to be. So I didn't have any. It's like comes on a pre-roll, so I just made my own. And since my fabric is a little bit thicker, I'm just using a really lightweight interfacing, and I just kind of, you can see I just kind of traced my collar and cut it out, and I'm going to do that and put it on the front and the back. I'm still going to stay stitch my edges just because we're working on these curves and then we cut on the bias, so just to make sure that they don't stretch while I'm putting it together. Okay, I just wanted to show you guys. So you should have your stay tape, or if you did what I did and I just sewed a little bit of interfacing on, and it should be on your right side of the fabric, because what's going to happen is we're going to put bias tape over top of that on the front, and so you're not going to see that, but it's going to just help stabilize it, make it a little bit stronger. I am on to French seams, and I have sewn my wrong sides together at 1 centimeter, or it's 0.39 inches. So I just round up. And then I'm going to trim that. I'm going to steam and press that nice and flat. And then you're going to sew your other 1 centimeter on the wrong side to enclose that seam. So then your right side, your seam will be enclosed on your right side and you won't see it. And then on the inside of your garment, you'll have a nice finished seam. So here is my French seam all enclosed, so you can see on the inside of the dress, it's nice and pretty, and then on the outside. Next step is we're going to make bias tape. The easiest way to make it is you're going to steam it in half, and then you're going to bring each side to that half mark and steam it up. So it's like 1/4 of an inch on each side. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you how I connect it. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys my bias tape. If you've noticed, I have a square end. What I like to do is I like to keep mine open when I'm attaching it. So I made my strips a little longer, and then I squared them. And then I'm going to, I'll show you how I attach it, but I think it's easier. I've always thought it's been easier for me instead of forming the loop and then attaching it, because sometimes it doesn't always line up. So if you make your strip a little bit longer, it doesn't matter because you'll have extra and you can go all the way around. I like to start on a shoulder or the back of the neck, since we're turning this to the right side of the garment. You don't want to start right in the middle of the front. So I'm going to open up my bias tape and I'm going to fold it in a little bit. And I'm going to pin it all the way around on the very edge. and I'm going to show you, I'm going to go pin it, and then I'll show you what's next. So I have it all pinned around my neck, and I'm starting on my center back. The French seams are a little bulky, so you might not want to start right there on the seam. So there is my folded. I unfolded it completely and then folded the edge over, so when I turn it, it will be nice and finished, as you can see. And then I leave this loose until I get to the end in case it stretches a little bit as I'm going along. And then all you're going to do is take this piece and you're going to sew right over top of where you turned it, maybe like another half an inch at most, just so you catch it in there, because then when you turn, you can see that it'll be all finished. And I'll show you how, when we get to that point, how to turn it. They say to sew on the 1 centimeter line. That's what the allowance is. To make it easier for myself, I am just going to sew how I normally attach bias tape, and I'm just going to sew on my quarter line and flip it and have a little bit thicker of a band, which I don't mind. But if you don't want a thicker band, then go ahead and sew on the 1 centimeter line. I think for me, it's just, I think this is easier just to do it that way. So I'm going to go sew that. So I have my bias tape sewn on. This is the inside of my garment. Here's my French seams, because remember we sewed it to the inside because we were flipping it the opposite of what you normally do bias tape. Normally people attach it on the right side of the neck and flip it to the inside. So here's what I was talking about. So I sewed over just a little bit to finish that. I'm going to cut it right now, this edge, because I don't need it. It's extra. And then the next step is you're going to trim your seam allowance, like in the book. I am going to follow that. And then we're going to press this out away from the garment. So you're pressing this seam down so this lays really nice and flat for when you turn it. And then that other 1/4 inch is going to be where you tuck it. So if you can see, here's my back center. So it will lay, everything will be enclosed underneath that, and then you're going to stitch on that 1/4 inch line and around the front of the neck. So it's a nice little trim on the outside. So I'm going to trim and press, and then I'll show it to you pinned before I sew. I'm all pinned. I wanted to show you guys on my dress form because it would lay a lot nicer. Like I said, so when I attached mine, I didn't do it on a centimeter. I did it on a 1/4, so it was a little thicker or wider to begin with then. But again, you can do it just like the book says. I just thought it was easier to do it that way. And you can see maybe a little bit of that crease. You can tuck under and make it narrower. I think I'm going to keep it thicker. I like the way it looks. So I only have the 1/4 edge tucked under. And then I pinned it all the way. Let me show you around. And then here's where we combined it, our pieces. So that's all combined. And then I'm going to sew along this bottom line right here, and you just want to sew along whatever line closest to the edge so it all gets tucked under there. Okay, so talking about the darts next, if you will notice, I'm going to swing by over to my dress form. They had you cut out the darts. I will say this is sample. I have never made this dress before, so I'm trying to follow it pretty much step by step. And I suggest you make a sample first, even if you just want to make the top half of it, make the tank. Because I finished this dart and I just kind of held it up to me, and this bust form is my height. It's hard to tell because the shoulders are they're cut off. They're much, don't go all the way down. But just looking at this on the bust form, I know that I am going to have to change this dart. So I highly suggest not cutting into the dart, and maybe doing a mock-up of the tank and kind of playing around with the dart. I think I'm going to have to actually move my dart up quite a bit. It's hard to do this one-handed, but this seems very low for a bust dart. So that's just something to keep in mind. I wouldn't cut this out unless you've made a sample. And there's very few reviews on Merchant and Mills. I did find a few, and a lot of people that made this dress, that's one thing they said was that they had to make multiple changes to it, including moving the bust dart and the sleeves and multiple other things. So I'm going to keep making notes in this video of things that I'm finding out as I'm going along. But so I am going to say yes, 100%. Make sure your darts are in the right place before you cut them out in your good fabric. So I've already sewn this one together, as you can see. They tell you to use a tiny zigzag stitch, and I did that. I tie my darts off, so I start at the point and then I don't lock it and I go all the way down. I lock the end and then I take a needle and I pull through to the other side, and then I put a small knot in mine to help not make such a point. And then sometimes when you backstitch, you get like a little bit of extra thread, so it's not bulky on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and pin and sew the other dart and see how that looks. So I sewed my darts, I pressed them open, and then I serged either side and then pressed them down away from the top of the garment. And now I just, let me flip around, pinned step 21, I pinned the back part of the dress to the back top part. So I'm going to go sew that. You'll definitely need your notches on here. Mine stretched a little bit too, so I just kind of worked it in as best as I could. Because this curve is so deep, so I have a little bit of extra on the end, so it should be okay. I lined it up to the armhole and I'm still matching up, because what's going to happen is this back seam is going to match the dart seam, so they'll come together on the sides. So I'm going to go sew that up and then talk about the next step. So I stitched, this is my back piece and then the back bottom. Stitch it together, it makes a really beautiful curve. And then it says to go ahead and you're going to press these out and then serge them together. So I'm going to do that, and then I think we'll be ready to line up the sides and sew those together. So I have pinned one side. I wanted to show you guys all the way down. They have you use your narrow zigzag stitch on the side seam, and then you can finish the seam. Big thing to note with this is to make sure, what I was telling you about earlier, that your dart and that back seam are supposed to match and line up. So you want one continuous line from that dart into the back. So double check that after you pin and make sure that they're all matched up. So when you sew, you're not off on the back. Okay, so I sewed my sides together. This is my wrong side. And I went and tried it on, and I have what I thought from the very beginning, some dart issues. So I cut out the size 8, and the darts are, I have a lot of room up here. It's very weird, actually. So since this is just a sample, and I like to kind of, like I said, make one and do exactly what the instructions are, so then I can kind of go from there. I tried this on inside out and I pinned it, and what I'm going to do is take that from the very beginning of the dart, and I'm going to take that line and move it up. I marked my apex on both sides of the top part on the left and the right, and I'm going to just go ahead and kind of make it take probably at least another half an inch out all the way up. It's just really baggy at the top when I tried it on. So I'm going to say that you guys are, it's going to be hard, I think, for this dress. It just, to not do some kind of bust movement on it, either up or down, smaller or bigger. So that's just something to note before you make this pattern. So I'm gonna kind of rework those and see how it goes, and I will be back in a little bit. Okay, so I have fixed my darts, and then I zigzagged the sides together, pressed them open, and then serged both sides. And I started to prepare my sleeve, and it wants you to do a double line of a basting stitch up at the top, and that's to ease the sleeve in. So I am going to ease my sleeves in, sew them up on the side, and ease one in at a time, and I'll show you when I have one in. I will say, again, from trying this on, even before I had too much room in the front, and that's why I made my bust darts bigger and longer. But then in the back, I feel like it's a little tight across my shoulders, and it was kind of hard to get on and off. So I'm a little apprehensive about putting the sleeves in, because I'm not sure. It might be one of those where you have to like lift your arms straight up. I know we've all tried a dress on like this in the dressing room, and you have to pull it from your stomach all the way up and keep your arms straight up. I feel like it's going to end up like that. So I'm going to put one sleeve in and try it on and see. When I make this again, what I might do is make the back a little bit bigger. see if I can add a little bit more room. I mean, even though it's cut on the bias, it just feels really stiff on the top part of the back. So, okay, I'm gonna sew a sleeve in and I'll be back. Okay, so I finished up both of my sleeves. I am ready to, I always baste beforehand. I think it's just a lot easier in case you get something caught or it shifts a little bit. It's a lot easier to pull out a basting stitch than it is if you sew the armhole in with a really small stitch and then have to pull it out. I think it's very rare that you put a sleeve in perfect the first time. I mean, it does happen, but I just always like to baste it, and then once I think it looks good, then I will go ahead and sew it. So a couple things to note, you'll have two notches, and that's going to match up with the two notches on the back. So when you're putting in your sleeve, you'll have two notches on the back side of the sleeve and one notch on the inside of the sleeve, which the one notch will correlate with the front of your dress, and then the two notches will go in the back. So that's how you know that you're putting the right sleeve on the left and right side. If you mix them up, you'll know because it won't hang right. So definitely make sure, especially if your fabric looks very similar, that the two notches are going to match up with the back. So I'm all pinned right sides together. I'm going to baste this in. Also to note, you don't want to put like a full gather in. You just kind of want to pull it a little bit to make sure that it's fitting in the sleeve. So when you start to sew, that the little bit of where you pulled will be above your seam allowance, so it's not going to show up on the outside of your dress, because otherwise, if you kept pulling so tight, you would almost create a gather, and that's not what you're doing. You're just kind of pulling it a little bit on each side to make a nice fit in the armhole. So I successfully got my first sleeve basted in. I'm very happy with it. I had a little catch up here, so that's what I was talking about, because since it was basted, I was able to undo the basting stitch and flatten it out and then rebaste it and make sure that it's all nice and even on the outside. So I am going to baste the other one in, and then I will be ready to sew the sleeves. Okay, so the sleeves are sewn in. I tried it on and I actually really like it. It fits really nice. I just gonna do a few tiny little minor adjustments to it. But I will say the back for me is it is a tiny bit still too tight. But it is one of those dresses that like you have to like get it over your back and then pull it off. And that just might be like if I add a little bit extra to my back or in the pattern, it might be okay. But it was definitely doable if you just leave it as is. You just kind of got to squiggle out from it a tiny bit and like pull it over your back. So I am ready to hem, and I am all done, and I will post a picture of me in it. All right, thanks guys. Bye.